So after baking the high poly ambient occlusion, it's time that we bake the low poly ambient occlusion. Now so far I've been baking in max because this is the easiest solution and pretty much everyone has that available. We could also do this ambient occlusion in a different program, and that's what we're going to do here. Now I'm selecting a few parts and I'm calling these dozer LP moving parts. Why? Because for the actual low poly ambient occlusion where the parts are intersecting, because that's the difference. It's not transferring details, it's about how the parts sit towards each other. I'm going to detach them. Now again, I'll state this clearly, you can also do this in Max, but I'm preparing these things to export them to a separate application. If you want to do this in Max, all you need to do is turn off the projection mapping, and then it should just bake the ambient occlusion for the object itself. Now for these objects here, I'm going to be detaching them just to move them out, because this thing, the problem with it is it rotates around. So if you get directional ambient occlusion in there, for example, the top is darker or something like that, then it's not going to look correct once you rig this thing and you actually get it to move. So we're going to select all these things and hit export, export selected, and export these as an OBJ. Just call them dozer_LP for low poly. And turn off export materials and just hit export. It's going to process everything and export them. Gives me a warning. Sent me a very weird thing, a rat's nest. I don't really know what that is. Has to be the most non-descriptive error I've ever seen in my life, but it's not giving me that much issues. So we have all these things in here, and this program is called FAOGen, Fast Ambient Occlusion Generator. It's not a free application, but it doesn't cost that much, and you can even get a discount if you Google a little bit for it. Now, the reason I like this program is because you can get huge sizes at insane speeds. It barely takes any time whatsoever to generate this. I'm just going to re-export this to fix a few things. I want to make sure it looks correct in there. And there we go. Just re-import this. Now I can select these parts separately. So we've got the moving parts there, got this thing. And the settings I have there are a preset for FAOGen, which you will get along on the DVD. There's a few specific settings which I've changed, so you can see it baking. And interesting here, I'm not actually speeding this up or not cutting anything. Now the black parts are nothing to worry about. Those are offset on the UVs. It's completely normal that that happens. So you see this took about 5 seconds to bake the ambient occlusion, which I think is absolutely fantastic. The only downside is you need to pay a little bit for this program, and it doesn't work for projection mapping. It only works for low poly ambient occlusion baking, so baking the ambient occlusion for an object itself without doing projection. So I'm going to do it for this moving part as well. Just select the right one in here. It's a bit of a problem that I have all these things in here, but I need to make sure that I export everything, because everything that can have an influence on the ambient occlusion on each other needs to be here when I bake this. So these parts are going to move, so I'm going to bake them by themselves. And to save out the textures, annoyingly, you always have to save the entire thing out along with the model itself. It's a bit stupid. You have to save the OBJ file and then it saves out a PNG as well. So I'm just using the bake selected here. Place it again. And so that's the ambient occlusion we got from it. It really is super smooth, no noise whatsoever. I really like the ambient occlusion results from this program. I just wish it did projection baking as well. But I just really love using it because it's so simple, so straightforward, and it just comes up with the results I want right away. Now, just seeing here, and I might want to save this as a TGA just to make sure. So save it out again, and it's created a TGA for me. So you see it generates the textures when you save the OBJ file. Bit of a weird thing to do. Now, I don't have a mask for this with the TGA. It doesn't save the alpha channel along, so I'm just going to put a diffuse map in here, set the size correctly, and save this as, let's see, the moving parts mask, because I need to be able to select these moving parts out. I need to be able to know which parts from the separate moving parts ambient occlusion I'm going to place on the non-moving parts ambient occlusion. So we're just rendering that mask out. That mask is really, really quick to render. So then I'm going to pick this moving parts mask, drop it in here, and there are a few parts that I need to fix a little bit. I'm going to increase the padding a bit to make sure that there are no issues with overlaps. So redo the mask, go back, and that looks about correct. So the padding is good now. We've got this layer. I'm going to duplicate it to the other document, close them, and then right now we've got this thing here. I might even want to expand the selection a little bit more. So we have our selection, and then we can mask out the parts for the moving area and place them onto the, so you can see there, that layer I turned off are the moving parts I just created. So they seem a little bit light compared to the rest, but I'm just going to save it out and have a look at it on the dozer. So we're going to save this out as a PNG. I'm calling it LPAO. Well, I'm going to combine this with the LPAO. We need both of these actually. So overlay them on top of each other, and there you can see it combines the details from the high poly with the actual correct ambient occlusion from the low poly. So I'm baking these twice. You can't do them both at the same time. You actually need two separate pauses for this to do it completely correct. So the one I just baked in FAO Gen is a little bit strong, so I might want to reduce the intensity on that a bit. I'm just messing around a bit, trying to see what looks right. 90%, 80%, whatever. So I'm going to resave this as the final AO texture, and then just in the shader here, go and load up that final ambient occlusion. And let's see. Also want to drop the normal map in there just so we can see. So as you can see, it's not as bright anymore. Certain areas are now masked out. It's a bit more representative of the actual light that's going to fall on there. Might be a bit too dark, but these are things we can tweak. You know, there's just an opacity slider for that layer. I just feel like that one wheel there has too much contrast in there. Like the center area is a bit too dark, so I'm going to go in and fix that a little bit. So this part is just the wheel, and I'm going to try and adjust that a little bit. So show just this thing. Select the parts that are not part of the wheel itself. Make sure to deselect all the correct areas. Deselect this area as well. Once I have that deselected, I'm just going to use the brightness contrast adjustments. Reduce the brightness a bit and increase the contrast slightly. Because I feel like I need to match this in with the rest a bit more. So also this area needs some slight adjusting. Because obviously the ambient occlusion that you bake with the actual intersecting object is going to have some more issues with texture sharing than other parts. So for this window here, that corner is actually quite dark. You can tell by me putting that thing over there. And that's something I don't really want. It has to match up with the rest. And then I'm going to grab the eraser tool. Make sure not to use a huge brush size like that. And erase that area a little bit so it blends into each other a little bit more. So there you go. That works. And then delete this little strip of polygons that we don't really need. Now, let's see. Assign the final AO. And the window looks better, but we still have one of those glass pieces that has like a dark patch on the side there. It's because it baked it where the chimney is, but it's used at the back where there's no chimney, so we're going to have to also change that around a little bit. So I turned up the ambient lighting to pure white, which makes it completely self-illuminated, this thing. It's easy to check what it looks like then. So I'm switching between the two AO methods and gives it a bit more depth. Now, I'm just going to copy the ambient occlusion from one window over the other. It doesn't really matter that much. I do feel like the main tone of the wheel is good, but this inner part, like this dark area which I'm selecting now, is still a little bit too dark. So I'm going to brighten that up again. There's not much you can do about this because since these parts have to move, I could construct some sort of generic ambient occluding box around it and bake it from that. Like try to create some sort of fake geometry that causes the ambient occlusion I want, but you know, it's even quicker to do in Photoshop than to render again, even if it renders very, very fast already. But this thing has some slight issues. It's a bit dark on the side, which is probably because it's sharing ambient occlusion with a part that we don't really like. So I'm going to mirror this area and put it on the other one, which is lit correctly in the ambient occlusion. So just share that area there. So that's the advantage. If you have parts sharing texture space, like 10 parts that are the same, and they're sharing 3 unique areas, you can just move them around and switch them between areas to better match their exact position. Scale this thing out a bit, and there we are, that looks better. This little wheel here looks like it's being occluded a little bit. We're going to delete it. It doesn't really matter. I mean, they're not really that obvious. So trying to adjust the contrast of the layer a little bit. This is something we're going to tweak later on anyway. I mean, strength of the ambient occlusion is something that's definitely not set. And it looks like we're almost there with baking our ambient occlusion and just baking most of our maps. And it's almost time to start texturing.